On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Marco Rossi found his footing in his first full season at the NHL level, so it makes all the sense in the world to trade him, right? We discuss.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite audio platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we evaluate the 2023-2024 season for Marco Rossi. After a struggle last year, both with his play and with the situation that he was put in by the team, a much better showing for Rossi this past season. So we'll take a look at the stats. We will take a look at your comments as to Rossi's performance this year and talk about the rumors that are swirling that Rossi is on the trade market and why that probably not a good idea. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. It is time for Marco Rossi's 2023-2024 report card. And let's just look at the numbers because obviously Rossi got the 19-game get your feet wet last year in 2022-2023, and it did not go particularly well. Just 1 point for Rossi in 19 games. Played mostly on the fourth line, played up in the lineup sparingly, and was eventually sent down to Iowa, where he spent the rest of the season just trying to work on the other facets of his game. Was an absolute menace in Iowa the rest of the season. And then it came to the Minnesota Wild roster last year and played every single game. Was one of only two players on the Minnesota Wild roster that played all 82 games this past season, him and Brock Faber. And so Rossi goes from 0 goals to 21, from 1 point to 40, and just look at these numbers all across the board. 21 goals in 82 games, 19 assists, 40 total points. He had 47 penalty minutes in the 82 games, 19 even strength goals. He had 2 power play goals and 6 total power play points, shot 12.6% with 295 total shot attempts, 167 shots, played 16 minutes, 44 seconds per night on the ice. His faceoff percentage was 44.7%, 37 blocks, 35 hits, 33 takeaways, 21 giveaways. And some of the other numbers as well. Possession metrics, Corsi for percentage. Marco Rossi's Corsi for percentage in all situations this season was 57.1%. And so standard being 50%, that being average. Rossi's Corsi for percentage, obviously 57. That's where you want to be. Rossi was on the ice for 61 goals for and 51 goals against. So was 10 better in the goals for department. And some of the other numbers, just about 1 goal per 60 minutes. Sat at 0.9 for the season, 1.7 points per 60 minutes. On ice goals, 4 per 60 of 2.7. On ice goals against of 2.2 per 60 minutes. And let's go to the point shares as well. 2.1 offensive point shares for Marco Rossi, 1.4 defensive point shares for 3.5 total point shares. And where does that rank amongst Minnesota Wild players this entire season? Well, that is a good question. Total point shares, Marco Rossi was 10th on the team, behind the likes of Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson, Brock Faber, Philip Gustafsson, Jonas Brodin, Marc-Andre Fleury, Matt Zuccarello, and Ryan Hartman. And so a lot of good that Marco Rossi was able to accomplish this season. Number one, let's count the fact that he played every game this year. And yes, as a young player, or in Marco Rossi's case, a rookie, you're going to have those ups and downs throughout the course of the season. But Rossi handled it because I think he had the mentality that was the appropriate one to take for just his entire experience of being an NHL player. And it was summed up in a quote that we referenced quite regularly on the show. Rossi, after a game, after one game in particular, talking to Kevin Gorg, said, "I just come to the arena every day and work hard and try to do my best." Hey, if you bring that at minimum, night in and night out, you're going to be all right. You're going to put yourself in position to impact the outcome now, whether it be from a points perspective or simply putting the team in position by making winning plays, winning battles along the boards, winning a face-off, blocking a shot, you name it. If you bring your full effort night in and night out, you're going to put yourself in a good situation. And Marco Rossi, one of the players who really hard to ever question the effort that he brings to the table on a nightly basis. Dude battles. He showed some bulldog mentality this year, which was kind of one of the areas that he improved upon down in Iowa after or during the 2022-2023 season. Just a little bit of abrasiveness, learning some of that from Joel Eriksson, but just not being a pushover out there. If somebody rubs you the wrong way, don't be afraid to dish it back to them. So Rossi really improved in a lot of those specific areas. Now, it is fair to look at his offensive production over the course of the season, which there were certainly some bright spots. There were certainly some lull points throughout the course of the season as well. But, you know, it's been pointed out by many in the comments, Denny in particular, but others have also pointed to the fact that, like, as a center, you can make the plays, and if you set a guy up for a great feed for a potential goal, but he doesn't hit on the shot, that's, you know, that reflects in the lack of points. So I just want to go kind of month by month for Marco Rossi and look at how his numbers did each month. So the first 9 games of the season, Rossi had 3 goals and an assist. He had 4 total points in the first 9 games of the season. We move to the month of November. So 3 points in 9 games. Rossi then, in 12 games in November, he had 3 goals, 5 assists. So he had 8 total points. And so the first 21 games of the season, Rossi had 6 goals and 6 assists. Let's move through the month of December. Rossi, in the month of December, he increased his production to 5 goals and 5 assists in the month. So he had 10 points in 14 games in December and increased his numbers to 11 goals and 11 assists in 35 games. Let's move that through the month of January. Rossi then goes to 13 goals, 15 assists, 28 points in 49 games. The month of February, Rossi gets up to 17 goals, 16 assists, 33 points in 60 games. The end of March, Rossi up to 20 goals, 17 assists, 37 points in 73 games. And then the month of April, he finishes with the 21 goals and the 19 assists. So there were, obviously the month of December was great for Rossi, but you know, let's not dismiss the fact that a guy who pretty notoriously did not shoot the puck was one of his primary puck handlers down the stretch. And from the All-Star break on, Rossi in 33 games, he had 8 goals, 4 assists, and 12 points. But let's keep in mind what the big switch was there. That was when we started to see Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, and Joel Eriksson deployed together more frequently. Before that, Rossi was getting playing time with Kaprizov and Zuccarello. He was getting top-line center minutes. He was getting second-line center minutes. Did kind of bump down further into the lineup, and he eventually settled in as that second-line center as the rest of the season unfolded. But you know, if you are a center trying to set up your teammates, certainly helps to have somebody that can shoot the puck, which is why we have been so vocal about trying to get somebody on that second line that actually lets it rip. Because there are certainly opportunities for Rossi to improve his scoring, but get somebody that can shoot the puck on that line to help him out a little bit. So overall, was impressed by what Rossi brought to the table. These are things that young players, this is the part of the process for the young players, is learning how to kind of adapt to what the NHL level is doing and learning how to be more consistent. And some of those other things that you can bring to the table now that you have seen how the NHL product works and you're ready for some of the curveballs that get thrown your way. Let's get to the voting. We'll get to the letter grades, and we'll hear from you as to what you thought about Marco Rossi's season this year. All that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Ladies and gentlemen, the Minnesota Timberwolves giving it at least one more game as they stave off elimination against the Dallas Mavericks. It is winner take all time as we move towards the dramatic crescendo of the Western Conference Finals. Eastern Conference Finals already decided. So the Boston Celtics just waiting to see who they will play in the NBA Finals. You can take advantage of this great offer from FanDuel. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. For instance, if you think Anthony Edwards is going to continue the Minnesota Timberwolves season, you can head to FanDuel and you can throw $5 down on that. Karl Anthony Towns to record 5+ made 3-pointers is plus 1,100. Maybe you feel like now that Cat's confidence is back, that's a good way to go as well. And Rudy Gobert to record 18+ rebounds, plus 1,000. Some good options for you at FanDuel, but make sure to take advantage so that you can cash in on $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. You may have seen it in the comments. We are currently in the works of Locked On Wild 2.0 coming to you here in a matter of days. Some new content coming out on all social media platforms, trying to take this to the next level and continue to give you as much Minnesota Wild content as we possibly can. So stay tuned. More details coming on that. Let's get to the votes. Let's hear what everybody has to say about Marco Rossi's 2023-2024 season. We'll go to the votes first and foremost. We'll start on YouTube because we had a bunch of comments. 120 votes. We had 33% of the vote go A for Marco Rossi, 57% said B, 8% said C, and 1% of the vote said F. So that was kind of how the voting broke down. As far as the actual votes go, let's take a look at these. Tyler Bach got it started. He said B+. With his prior pedigree, I expected slightly more, but I'm also a noob hockey fan. I won't consider myself seasoned until a few years down the road. That said, I think that Rossi needs to stay for the love of the North Stars. Do not trade him, please. So B+ from Tyler. Gary says, gave him a B, but really leaning towards an A. If he could get a little help from his friends, line mates, he'd be right there. Dougie, A-, commitment and effort to get where he's at after the hand he was dealt is second to none. Has room to grow and show more of his skills with experience. Give Marco quality line mates and he will likely excel as he matures. I worry if he's traded, he will become one of the ones we'll kick ourselves for letting go, i.e. Brent Burns, Darcy Kemper. The list goes on and on. John, B+. Grading really showed a lot, but faded in the home stretch, probably due to playing with Mr. Johansson. No way he should be traded. If Bill Guerin does that, he is an idiot. Trav, Rossi gets a B to B-. He did better than I thought he was going to do, but he was a ghost for stretches too. He does fine with better talent around him, but he isn't a game changer yet. The Dune 9210, A-, exceeded expectations. Please don't trade him. Denny, the captain, Marco absolutely gets an A from me. When you're playing with Mojo, who's on vacation all year, just think how many points he would have had. Ron, I would probably give him a B+, just because he was the only one on his line that excelled. Zuccarello would get a C- after his split with Kaprizov. And Johansson would probably get nothing higher than a Z- and a permanent role in the Al Shaver press box. Urban, solid B. He did more than I expected. Definitely helped he got a real shot, which Urban didn't expect. There's definitely more room to grow his game and be a true top six guy. The Big V8644, much needed improvement with better opportunities. Still had some ups and downs, but I think his downs for points can be attributed to some of the guys he played with having horrendous years. I still think he gets traded, though, and I wouldn't hesitate if the right draft situation comes along or a chance at another proven younger top six player. So pretty consensus in the B and the A range. As far as the Twitter votes go, 30 votes, 76.7% said B, 23.3% said A. So let's take a look at the categories here. Let's start with the offense. And with the fact that Rossi was tied for fourth on the team in goals with 21, tied with Ryan Hartman for that spot. He finished with 40 points, which also puts him near the top of the leaderboard on a team that just, quite frankly, did not do a ton of scoring. Like points-wise, Rossi is seventh on the team, trailing only Hartman, Faber, Zuccarello, Eriksson Ek, Boldy, and Kaprizov. And factoring in that line mates didn't really carry their weight for Rossi at points throughout the season, I'm going to go on the offensive side. I'm going to go with a 3.5 out of 5. Rossi did some really good things. He was a net front guy, like just defaulted to the net, which I think is a fantastic spot for young guys, especially centers, to start. And we did see, as the year wore on, we did see him start to pull his shot from a little further away. Now, obviously, that's an area that he can certainly improve upon going forward. But we did start to see some signs of that as the year wore on. Now just need to see it more consistently. So I'm going with a 3.5. I could certainly be swayed into a 4. You got to take weight into the fact that he was arguably your 5th best option for goals on the team, and the fact that he played the entire season. So I'm going 3.5 there. Defense, honestly, I'm going to go 4. I think Rossi brought a level of physicality, especially for his size, that was just not consistently delivered by teammates. Like, how many times do we see Rossi get involved in after the play scrums, or just even going and battling along the boards for a puck? It's just something that did not consistently happen for many Wild players throughout the season. So I'm going 4 on the defensive side. And then on special teams, Rossi was part of that second power play unit for a large majority of the year. That unit did absolutely nothing for large parts of the season. It was basically a 1-unit power play. And a lot of that stems from the players that were most commonly utilized on that second unit. Not necessarily having anything to do with what Rossi brought to the table himself. And so I'm going to go 3 out of 5 on special teams, but I'm not throwing a ton of weight in there because he just wasn't utilized a ton in that position. And so for the overall grade, I think I'm going to go BB plus. There's definitely room for improvement, but we need to factor in that Rossi played 82 games, that he became a guy who just was one of the few that you didn't worry about. I know the scoring production dipped and was up and down, but I never really worried about what Marco Rossi was doing on the ice, because he just kind of put his head down and just did his job. So that is something that I think is really a good spot for him to build, a good building block for this season, and something that with better line mates around him, that could be certainly an area for him to improve. So I'm going BB plus with Rossi this year. Like I said, he was impressive. The scoring, I know, up and down, but for a young player, the consistency is the big thing that they, by and large, need to work on. And so no different than Matt Boldy. Like, if Rossi can just develop some consistency, he's going to be just fine. Which is why it would be a bad idea to trade him, right? We'll talk about that to finish the show today as we finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Let's take a look at the reports that the Minnesota Wild are at least open to the possibility of moving Marco Rossi if the right deal presents itself. And here's all you need to know about why this came about. So it has been reported by Michael Russo that the Minnesota Wilds are at least entertaining the possibility of trading Marco Rossi for somebody who can offer somebody who can offer more, I guess, in the size department for one. They're looking to see if they can kind of capitalize on Rossi's year and bring in somebody similar to how the Anaheim Ducks acquired Cutter Gauthier from the Philadelphia Flyers. But here's the thing with that is this just is a further extension of, I think, where this team is at. The Athletic put out a piece that looked at what you need as a contender. Dom Lashusen was the one that wrote it. What you need as a contender. You need to have, those that unquestioned number one top line. You need to have good center depth. You need to have a great goaltender. You need to have this and this and that. And just in pivoting off of our conversation about Joel Eriksson Ek as a 1C, obviously, if you got somebody that was a bona fide 1C, like if you added Jack Eichel to this mix, if you added Rupe Hintz to this mix, if you added Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon to this Minnesota Wild roster, they're the unquestioned 1C, which means that Joel Eriksson Ek would slot in as the 2, and Marco Rossi would, in that situation, be the third center. And so I understand that line of thinking, but here's the problem, is look at the leap that Rossi took from his 19-game stint in 22-23 to this past season. And look at all of the things on a team that has just so many different spots that need to be fixed. Trading him to bring in either a prospect that you hope could be a bona fide 1C, or bringing in a veteran to try to help you more win now. Like, you are making a short-sighted move in the veteran point. You're making a short-sighted move and getting rid of a guy that could really be something for you down the stretch. Now, if a situation exists in which you get somebody that has a lot of what Rossi brings to the table, but is like 6'4" or 6'3", then obviously that's something you could consider. But those types of trades just don't happen. Like, you can't just say, hey, we need to find everything that Marco Rossi does, but just find it in a bigger frame. Like, okay, cool. Go do that on NHL 24. And so it's either that the front office is really like looking at this as a possibility, or in my hope, they're floating this out there with the hope that some GM kind of panics and overpays. Now, one trendy scenario in which this could be a possible, possibility is if you're looking to move up in the draft, and instead of offering a pick in addition to your first round pick, like a pick swap, if you're looking at doing a pick swap into the top 10 from 13, say to around the 6 or the 5 area, then that would be where throwing in a young player like this could potentially be appealing. This was brought to my attention on Twitter about the possibility of just doing a pick swap with the New Jersey Devils and offering them Philip Gustafson to make it work. That would certainly be a possibility, and that would be a great way to move up and to grab somebody that could be a top 6 guy, borderline on a top line guy further down the road. But It just, this is just the part of the equation that I'm not a huge fan of. Is you take a guy like Rossi, who has battled a ton of adversity, just came in and did his work day in, day out, played the full 82 game season. And then you're going to turn around and you're going to say, we got to find something. We got to find something better for a top 6 center with his like one full season of work in the equation, without knowing if he could take that. Like, let's consider this. If there was some crystal ball in which Marco Rossi, like you look out on the rest of his career and you see that his ceiling is a 20 goal guy, maybe 40 to 45 points. Under that circumstance, would you be open to trading him to add something that is also a young player that maybe has a higher ceiling? Sure. But that's one scenario. There's also another scenario in which he goes on the same sort of run that Joel Eriksson Ek has, and he turns into a 25, 30 goal guy, and he starts to add points with better skilled line mates around him. He starts to creep that point total up towards 50, 60, 70. And so that's the part of it that I can't really get behind, is if he continues to improve, you're trading away a smaller version of Joel Eriksson Ek. Now, maybe Rossi has a little work to do to get to that level defensively, but we have spent years, we spent decades just groaning over the center depth, groaning over how this team is stacked up down the middle. And now all of a sudden, you've got Joel Eriksson Ek firmly entrenched, and Marco Rossi took some nice steps towards potentially being another guy in your top 6. And guess what? If you end up acquiring somebody or drafting somebody that vaults all the way up to the top of the lineup, Marco Rossi as a 3C in a proper depth lineup, that would be a massive pain for anybody that you would play against. But you would only know that is a possibility if you continue to keep him around. You're going to just add him to the list of players that have success against the Minnesota Wild as former Wild players if you bail on him at this point. But this is kind of par for the course. And so, me personally, I would much rather see Rossi stick around and continue to build off of what was a really solid season for him, and just continue to try to cultivate that young talent so that in a year from now, you have a bunch of just young level players that are ready to step in and to take care of business. So, the continued circulation of that is annoying to me, but obviously where there's smoke, there's fire. It's not going to be reported by somebody who is as plugged in as Michael Russo is. And let's be clear here, Russo is against it too. Like he is not advocating for a trade of a guy like Marco Rossi. He thinks it's as bad of an idea as all of us do. But it's not, he's not putting it out there for no reason. So I hope it doesn't happen, but as we typically do, we will continue to keep you up to date. Now, before we go, where would Rossi slide in on a playoff team? Where would he slide in on the Dallas Stars, Colorado Avalanche? I think in a playoff team, he is, as of right now, a 3C. with proper depth of center. But let's classify him as a player that certainly has the capability to rise into the top 6 on a playoff team. But I think right now, properly lined up depth with a playoff team, I think Rossi's a 3 seed. But he's got a lot of time in front of him to hop higher in the lineup, and I certainly hope he does that here. That'll do it for today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to hit the like button if you have not already, and make sure to follow along on your favorite audio platforms so that you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.